All right, welcome back to the Logan Show. With me today, one of the most revered frontman out there in rock, and one of the most revered rock bands out there right now, probably the last 15 years. Of course, Jay Buchanan from Rival Sons. Jay, what's happening, man?
Hey, Logan. How are you, bud?
Good, man. I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for doing this. And I got to say, out of all of the bands that I've interviewed, not too many, very few come to mind that have the level of respect, I guess, and excitement that Rival Sons has. It's really mind-boggling to me when you go online and you look at anything, the comments on anything pertaining to Rival Sons, whether it's an interview with you or Scott Holiday or somebody else from the band, a music video, whatever. Everybody's like, this band is so special. This is the best band in decades. There's a million people out there saying that you are the best singer out there in rock. And I got to imagine it's certainly not a bad thing, but it's got to be a great feeling to be so praised, especially in the age of the internet where everybody likes to talk shit.
First of all, thanks for that, but I'm certainly not without my detractors. I'm sure. I'm sure they're out there, but you know, I feel like any amount of accolades that I can get, great. You know, it makes my job easier. That's for sure. But music's such a personal. It's such a personal taste for people. You know, so it's like if I'm somebody's favorite, I'm going to be somebody else's cringe. You know, that's the way it typically works. Like you're always somebody else's worst band, and but that's part of what makes music cool. You know,
Sure.
everyone has their own tastes and all of that stuff. But I think that the greatest accolades for me in our career have been when I talk to, you know, maybe some of our heroes, or I talk to people that have been in the racket for a really long time, and whenever they have something nice to say, it's always like, whoa, okay, you know, it hits you like all the way through, you know. And I've had the good fortune to have some long conversations with some of my heroes and mentors, and anytime I have the opportunity to do that, I always walk away, you know, just with a little bit more knowledge, and that's really my favorite.
Well, the other thing I want to point out before we really get into everything going on with Rival Sons right now is that you really are like a fucking chameleon. I swear to God, every time I see you, whether it's in an interview or a photo of you, you look so different. And I think if you had, you could pull up 5 different photos of you over the years, and it's like, there's no way this is the same guy. It's really it's remarkable the how much your looks change, I guess, from time to time.
I get bored with myself, Logan. I get bored with myself, and I think that artistically switching things up as much as possible, it keeps the blood transfusion going. You know what I mean? Like waking up and going about things in the same way that you always like that you're used to doing. I think that I have this thing that whenever I get a little bit too comfortable, it's time to completely change things, you know, completely. I'll get rid of all of my clothing, dye my hair, I just do whatever in order to showcase or to reveal a different part of myself to myself, or just completely switch things up. You know, there's so many aspects in my life that aren't going to change. You know,
Sure.
I'm a father. And I'm always, you know, that's not going to change. And like the way I treat my kids and the way I am to my children, trying to be a good pop and be dependable and consistent, like all of those things. Same thing with being trying to be a good family man and a husband. You know, like those things don't change. So I think that the things that I have control over that I can't afford to change, I like to switch them up on a regular basis, just to try to take on like a new, like to challenge my identity to myself. and just try to approach things from a different lens and approach things from a different angle. It's like I like to read, and I'm not going to read the same book over and over.
Sure.
I want to read different books in order to get a different perspective on different things. And I think that changing your appearance will force you to it'll force you to operate a little bit differently. Because when you look in the mirror, not seeing the same, it immediately ignites something a little bit different.
Oh, spoken like a true artist. Before we get into these, obviously we're going to talk about these new releases that the band has coming out over the next few weeks. But first, you guys just recently wrapped up, about a month ago, you wrapped up the co-headline tour with Clutch. I thought that was such a great bill because obviously there's certainly some similarities, but the bands kind of come from two different worlds. I mean, Clutch, I would say, comes from a little bit more of that, the stoner rock kind of world. And then, part of the dates you had Fu Manchu, which, again, maybe a little more similar to Clutch, but kind of has their own thing going on. And then Blackstone Cherry with, a little bit more of an active rock vibe. Still they got the Southern thing going on, but a little more active rock. And, in my mind, it's tours like that where, those are the best kind of lineups because you're not watching the same band 3 or 4 times in a row, and you're getting multiple demographics out to the show, and everybody can kind of, take fans from each other. And, I'm really big into these, not that that was the most diverse tour ever, but, I think these tour packages where it is bands from different worlds coming together, I think that's the best way to go about it for the fans. And I would also just imagine, the bands being out on the road too. It's nice to, maybe play with people that you wouldn't necessarily always be associated with.
I'm a big fan of that. I think that for Rival Sons, ever since we've been doing what we do, I feel that within the rock genre, like we've always kind of felt like an outlier to a degree, because we aren't like Rival Sons is definitely not active rock. We aren't stoner rock, but we also aren't straight up the middle, and we aren't very much. I don't feel like we fit into the like alternative rock. We don't fit those parameters, and I think that ever since we got started, we've worked really hard to first and foremost just cultivate our own hybrid, because with all of these bands, everyone, even though the music may be different, you trust that each band is delivering their version of the truth. And I think that for us, we've always tried to do that. And we grab from all different angles in terms of our resources and like all of our influences and inspirations and everything. The idea of touring with like a disparate lineup like that, like when we're out with, when we had Fu Manchu, and then we've got Clutch, and then you have us, and sometimes Clutch would close the night, and then sometimes we would close the night. I loved it. Of course, like Fu Manchu and Clutch have a lot more in common than we do with either of them. Like coming from Southern California, we all love Fu Manchu. That's like, everybody loves that band. And it's the same thing with Clutch, like getting to watch those guys night after night, coming at it from a completely different angle. And it's a completely different bag of tricks and ethos, period. But I love to be surrounded by people that are as different from me as possible, because you pick up different elements of the art. To watch Clutch do what they're doing, because they're very much about primary colors, right? You have the riff, you have the energy. Neil's going to sing things in his particular way, and it's very much like one line drawing, very primary colors and very heavy throughout the entire set. Like the consistency of that movement, it's like this big wall of sound that comes at you. I loved it every night, and um, showcasing that, showcasing that and showcasing um, the different colors of, we all come from the same family tree, but showcasing these different branches off of that family tree. I love that. And I think it's really healthy. I love the idea of when you come to a show, if you're going to be one of those concert goers that shows up for the opening band, the second of three, and if maybe your band is the second band, well, stay for the closing band too. So like for that part of the audience that is there for the long haul, my hat's off to you. That's for sure. But like giving those people a well-rounded experience, that's at its best. That's what I like to do, and because like three bands in a row that are just going to be kind of doing the same thing, I get worn out. For me, I'm just going to get a little too chafed,
Sure.
and no matter what, you're going to get the people that are going to be like, oh, that was too different, I like it like this. Or even some of our fans that are like, yeah, that Clutch band, they were a little heavy for me. Well, like, first of all, thanks for watching all of their sets, because it's good to be exposed to music that you didn't necessarily come to see.
Well, let's talk about these new releases, Pairs of Aces, which, as the title suggests, is two separate releases, both of the band's first two releases, the first record, Before the Fire, and the self-titled EP, both recorded live from Santa Catalina Island. The first part, Before the Fire, will be out by the time this releases, so it's out now, and then part two comes out on December 13th. And these were actually recorded during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, that's correct. They're recorded in the late spring of 2021, and we had wanted to try to put together some sort of a, because at that time during the pandemic, the lockdown, bands were trying to put together these shows, living room shows, these different things, and we wanted to do something to interact with our audience. We wanted to do something like that. But I think that Scott and I, we had seen a lot of these shows, and they just sounded like shit. And the bands weren't doing a good job. I mean, it's cool to it's always cool to do something. So, credit to all of these bands, but they just sounded bad, and they're charging the audience. And that we didn't think it was cool. We didn't want to do something like that. So what we did is, we partnered with the company and we've tried to make it epic. We were looking at locations like, okay, we're going to do something around maybe something in Long Beach. What are we going to do? And then I had the idea of the casino at Catalina Island. Ever since I was a little kid, I had always wanted to play a show in there. And that was a pipe dream. But then when I brought it up to our then management, he's like, okay, well, let me give him a call. Let me see if that's even an option. And it came back as an option. And that just blew our minds. Scott and I and the rest of the band were so excited. But in the end, we were able to put together a production and both sound and visually, we were able to put together a production on a decent enough budget where we could record it live instead of doing like the direct live stream. We wanted to have some sort of control over it where we could make sure that the audio sounded as good as it could, and that the visuals looked as cinematic as we were capable of producing at that time. And so what we got was these two shows. The first night was recorded in the grand ballroom of the casino, and then that was for the Before the Fire album. And we did those, and we recorded these in their entirety. And so it's all live. The whole thing is live, even though it's pre-recorded, but it's pre-recorded live. And you see it all there. It's all It's all on film, and the audio is, intentionally, we had wanted to, with the production of the audio, wanted to make it relatively dry, where it didn't sound like a studio album, you know. So keeping things relatively dry that way, so that you could hear like every crack, every weird note, or like any mistake, um, treating it like showcasing the live nature of it. And then the second album was the EP, on the self-titled EP, and we recorded that in another location in the casino, and that was the theater that was uh, the first theater in the country for um, uh, films with audio, like talkie
Oh,
talking
wow.
films.
No
So
kidding.
this was the first, this was the first theater ever built, because all the studio executives and in Hollywood, to go and do their pre-screenings and have their big to-dos, they would all get on, they would charter their boats and yachts and everything, and then they would all go out and stay in, uh, take their boats over to Avalon Bay there, get out, and then have this big to-do over uh, at that theater. So that was great. That was a really, really cool experience, and a great sounding room.
Yeah, that's an incredible backstory about the casino as well. Well, how did you guys make the decision to do the first album and the self-titled EP? What was it that made you guys want to choose those to do?
Oh, what it was the first album and the EP had both had their 10-year anniversary. So in 2019, in late 2019, that would have been the anniversary for the Before the Fire record. And then in 2020, that was the anniversary for the EP. And we couldn't tour. We were just coming off of the road in 2019. We wrapped up in Russia. We finished up in Russia in December of 2019 to finish out that year. And then and we had planned to do some sort of a commemorative, 10-year anniversary for the Before the Fire record. But then, in March of 2020, all, shit hit the fan, and canceling tours and doing all of that stuff. But it was really the intention to celebrate, a 10-year anniversary of both of those records. We just thought, let's just do a double header that way.
Well, things during the pandemic were so crazy. Did you guys ever do any of those any drive-in shows?
No, no, we didn't do any drive-in shows. I had heard a lot of those drive-in shows. It's just like, I don't want to, I just, I don't want to play to cars,
Right.
I don't want to play to cars, and then for them to like clap, then they just hit their car horns. Like, I get it, but it's like, you know, if I got to wear 10 condoms, I'd rather not fuck at all.
Of course.
I'll just do something else. I'll go watch a movie or something.
It was
So
crazy. I went to a drive-in show, and it was so, it was like that they were not prepared, not the artists, but the venue. I mean, it was just so, you couldn't even hear what was, granted, it was an acoustic show, in this parking lot. And it was such a weird experience, and just I'm obviously so grateful that we're way past that point now. But that was just what an interesting time for everything, but specifically music related. What an interesting time for concerts that was, with live streams and drive-ins and
it
all
was
sorts of shit.
it was very strange, and I think that for all of us, when we were all coming out of it, I think that it could not happen quickly enough. We all just wanted to be together. Everybody just wanted to be back to being together.
In a
And
sense, though, was it almost when you guys finally, when everything was over and you could go back and get back at it, was it almost refreshing, though, during the pandemic? I mean, obviously it was a horrible thing, but was it refreshing in the sense of like, well, we weren't going to take a break, but now we kind of have this break. And so it is nice to be off the road and be away from the rest of the guys for a little bit and be with family and all that? Or was it still like, fuck man, we really just want to get back out there. We don't need a break.
Well, the forced isolation, was there a silver lining? Like, yeah, Logan, of course there was. I think there was for many people. Ever since then, there's more people demanding to work from home, um, and seeing the value of taking it a little bit slower. And I think that for me, I was living out in Tennessee, and of course, it was a major bummer for us because we had just been nominated for a couple of Grammys, and our career was really doing better than it had ever been doing. And then all of a sudden it all drops off.
Yeah.
The entire industry shuts down. And we're really primed for great things. But at that time I was living in Tennessee and in Nashville, working in the studios a lot and doing all of that. And then during 2020, we had another child, and then we needed to leave Tennessee and move back to California, where we're from, to raise our kid around, grandparents and all of that stuff.
Sure.
The things that you have to do. But the pandemic, that forced isolation, it made it so that I got to be with my wife through her entire pregnancy, with her every single day, and take care of her, and just make sure that everything went smooth. And in what bizarre world would that ever happen? Yeah. I love my job. I'll always choose to work. I have the funnest job in the world. It's the best. Music is the best. I couldn't imagine a luckier or just better vocation. So I'll always, as a father and a husband and as a provider, you have that. But then also I'm an artist and I'm a musician, and playing music is, for years and years, I did it for free because we all do. All of us who are in the hustle, you put in those 10,000 hours doing it for close to nothing because you love music. Before you actually have an audience, before you have a career, you sign that contract. So being able to be home and take care of my wife and be with my family through that crazy time was fantastic. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. But it's like you take the good with the bad,
Sure.
Like, was it nice to take time off from touring? Well, yeah, of course. Not that much. Not that much time. I mean, come on. But I love to travel, and traveling is one of the greatest joys of my life. And so having that come to a grinding halt was also, damn near devastating for me. And I'm just so happy to be back out doing it. That's for sure.
Well, with the release of Pair of Aces over the next month or so, where does that put things at in terms of a new studio album to follow up Dark Fighter and Lightbringer from last year?
Scott and I we're talking about it right now, about getting started on writing the next Rival Sons record. So we're doing that. I think Scott's working on producing a rock band, and I'm working on producing a couple of artists as well in our downtime. I'm finishing up the writing for a solo record in tandem with beginning the work on another Rival Sons album. So probably late this year or early next year, you'll see another Rival Sons record come about.
Is it a safe bet to say that the next record will once again be produced by Dave Cobb?
More than likely. I mean, we've been together a really, really long time, but we got to talk with Dave, and I think that something like that. Even though we've worked together so much, it's like everybody has to come together and feel really good. Like, okay, like things have to align properly. We always talk about it and like see where everybody's heads are at. I love working with Dave, and I mean, gosh, we've recorded 9 records with that man. That's a lot of time together.
Yeah, well, and outside of you guys too, what a resume that guy has. I mean, my God, that guy is, he's a legend.
Oh yeah, no, Dave is definitely, he's just so damn good at what he does. We love Dave, and I do. He's a good friend and a extremely talented person.
When you work with somebody that long on so many, like you said, 9 different albums, I mean, is Dave Cobb essentially almost like a silent member of Rival Sons now, having done so much with you guys?
Well, you could say that from a recording standpoint. Like when we've gone in to make records, we do them with Cobb. But I think that the band, like, we've covered so much ground. We've covered so much ground artistically and literally, all over the world, touring so much over the years. I think that when it comes to a certain degree of record making, he's like a fifth member that way, but it's only within that vacuum of like when we're making the records. Because who the band is outside of when we go to make records is so much more,
Sure.
Like we've got just our live show and just like the actual ethos and like who the band is at its core. I think it's just so much more than what we do in the studio, because the writing takes place and outside of the studio or outside of Cobb's purview, or so much of it, because Dave Cobb he'll lend a hand on inspiration and writing here and there. But I think that when we're writing, it is very much like that, But I think that the more the band has grown, I think that it's less and less so, and it's less and less so that way because and I think that Cobb would agree that him watching us grow the way that we have and the way, like, our creative approach and everything. He's just, it's wonderful to work together, knowing each other so well, Cobb knows me just about as well as anybody else does. And, having like a shorthand of communication definitely helps out when you're in the studio. Like, a lot of the time you'll just be thinking the same thing, and I think that just comes from making so many records together, that you can be on the same page, and then at other times completely be on a completely separate page because you're so close.
Sure.
It's like family.
Well, one last thing, I know we're running out of time, but the one last thing I wanted to ask you was, looking back at Rival Sons history, something I always found so interesting about Rival Sons is that you guys, at one point were on Earache Records, which, for those that don't know, is predominantly an extreme metal label. So obviously a bit of a shocking pairing, I guess, when you look at the rest of their roster. But, and it was funny, a few months ago, I was talking to Charlie Starr from Blackberry Smoke. They were on Earache over in Europe. And, he said that, the label was getting some backlash from fans of bands in the label, like, what the fuck are you guys doing signing? This band ain't metal, But then I was watching something with you where you guys were you were talking about the early tour that you guys did with Judas Priest and Queensryche, and there was a little bit of hesitancy. You guys were like, well, this isn't really our scene. But then you said that Digby Pearson from the label said he told you that you guys make the rock and roll music that came just before those bands came out. And to me, that was like this, I don't know. It was like this light bulb moment. Like, what a great way to point that out, because I think Rival Sons on Earache with all these death metal and grindcore bands, it doesn't make sense. But then when he put it like that, it's like, oh shit, now this makes a ton of sense actually.
I think that to Digby's credit, and I believe it was Digby, and it was Digby to his credit, bringing that up. Um, it was it was easier to wrap our heads around. Like, oh, wait a minute, okay, I get it. So, like, seeing ourselves as part of that lineage, I think was important, and then ultimately treating the entire situation as a much more inclusive, uh, thing, and seeing the ways in which we're similar as opposed to the ways that we're different. And I mean, that's always a good thing.
Of course.
To look like to look at like early Priest and look at the first two records and be like, oh, wait a minute, I get that, and especially after having the time and like talking with Rob in those early days for us, and him just being so gracious and offering some really good advice, really, really good advice. His number one thing was just stay together, you guys. You want to make it? Stay together. And you think like, well, yeah, you stay together. It's hard.
Sure.
It's hard for bands to stay together. You go through a lot of shit together. Like, man, you go through a lot. People grow. Your artistic approach changes. I mean, who you are continues to change. And I think that that's one thing for Rival Sons, that as we've changed as people, it's reflected in the music, So if you look at those early records, you look at, like the material that we performed on the Pair of Aces with the Before the Fire record, and then the EP. And then, after that, you have the Pressure and Time album, Head Down, and so on and so on. Well, if you look at that early material, and then you look at like our last two studio albums that we put out last year, we released two different records last year. Both of those records are wildly different from that early material, and that's reflective of our growth just as people individually, but then collectively, the band as a unit, having grown in further and further in our own direction, and to my opinion, wearing those early influences less and less and less, and hoping to purvey our own style as much as possible, in a very organic way. So staying together and following Rob's advice, I'm glad we did, because now we're able to write and produce the type of music that we do now, there would have been no way that we would have been capable of that in those earlier years, because it takes experience.
Well, as we wrap this up, I guess, as we close out 2024, anything coming up going into the new year that we can that you can talk about right now, or is we're going to have to wait and find out what's next for the band?
Well, we are going to, of course, we'll be doing some touring this year. That's for sure. We're going to be working on another record. There's a movie, like a documentary, that's been in the works for close to 10 years. Can't say exactly when that's going to be coming out, but it will. And that's going to be wild to see and to experience, because we've covered a lot of ground over the last 10 years. 10 years for any band, much less a rock band, that's a lifetime.
Well, probably also a mountain of footage to sort through too. I mean, that's a lot happens in a decade.
Yeah. Tom Gilday, great director, producer. he and his crew have been following us around for the last 10 years. And they've got like so much footage. And so we'll see how that all turns out. I'll bet it's going to be great. So especially for fans of the band, it's probably going to be pretty wild to see. I think it's going to be wild for us to see.
I can believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
To be a little
So
bit surreal.
I look forward to that, and just writing more material, being a recording and touring band. There are things that change, but I think we'll always tour, and we'll always write and record songs. So that's the part that doesn't change.
Well, the first part of Pair of Aces is out now. The second part comes out on December 13th. Jay, thank you so much, man, for coming on and taking some time. Really appreciate it, and would love to do it again sometime when we have more time and we can go through the entire saga of Rival Sons.
I love that. Thanks for taking the time, Logan, and thanks to all of your listeners for your support of rock music.